The replace function in Apollo allows you to take built-in items and customize them to the needs of the organization that you're working with. Perhaps you have different wording, but you have the same general needs as a requirement that's already in the system. Here I'll do a search for the word CTA. And perhaps in my organization, I don't call this a CTA. I want to spell out the word call to action every time. So I can expand this requirement and hit View Details. And I have the ability to customize this to update the wording just for what I need. So this Replace button allows me to make a substitution for the text of the requirement question or description. So if I hit Replace here, I can remove CTA and type out call to action each time, for example. And I can update the description if I want to as well. And I can choose the scope at which I'm making this update. Most people will only see property and organization. If you're an agency partner, you will also see the agency level as well here. So these changes will impact the level that I choose. If I choose property, it will just be the Apollo property that I'm working in. If I choose organization, all other properties, as well as future properties that I create, will see my substitutions. And if I choose agency, if I have that option available, every organization and property under my agency would be able to see this change. So choose the scope wisely based on how you want this to work and how global you want the substitution to be. I'm going to choose organization in this case. Then I'm going to review this and see if there's anything else that needs to be changed. It looks like there are a couple of other items. There are the attribute names themselves and the variable names that I might also want to substitute. And I would hit replace in a real example, but in this case, I'm going to exit without saving. And in order to make substitutions or replacements on the attribute names, which are the toggles that you would actually select in Apollo in the event attribute screen, or the variables themselves, which make it into Adobe Analytics, we could click on each of these. For the attribute names themselves, these are what appear in Apollo, so I could substitute that text or adjust the description as needed as well. Same here, I'll choose the appropriate scope for this item based on how pervasive I need it to be. And for the variable names in Analytics, I can also click on them, hit the replace icon, and make adjustments to the variable name or description. It's also possible here to change the settings of the variable. It is very intentional that we recommend the settings that are chosen here, so make sure that you think about the implications throughout your entire system if you do make adjustments here, because every time that this event is referenced, these updates will be present. So for example, let's say that we actually didn't want people to be performing this action a lot, and we wanted more of it to reflect negatively in charge. So we could change our polarity from positive to negative. Or perhaps this event happens so often and we really only care whether or not it happens per visit. So we could change it from always record to once per visit, for example. So any settings that you would change in the admin console, you can reflect those changes in Apollo and have them flow through to the documentation and the admin updates in Adobe. So again, choose these wisely from an architecture perspective, select the appropriate scope, and you would hit save if you wanted to truly make this change to the variable. So any item that you can click on and see this replace icon, you're able to do this with. I can also replace the data source itself. So perhaps in my case, I want a little different data layer path. I can name it differently in the data layer. I can also change where it's coming from. So perhaps this is populated via a query string parameter from the URL, in which case I could specify what that query string parameter is if I were to select this. Perhaps it's the same value every time, it's a static value. Or perhaps I want to represent this item with a custom code block. And this would translate to my tag manager as well. So choosing custom code will actually bring up a code editor, and that will come through all the way to what gets published into Adobe Launch. So make these choices appropriately. And you'll note that you can also change the value types, regex patterns, examples, that would contribute to your documentation and validation. So if there are examples that are more specific to your company, you can edit these from the built-in examples. And if you know that the values always are going to be a maximum of a particular length, the minimum of a particular length based on the underlying data source, you can specify the length in characters, as well as a regex pattern that this should match if that is known. And then those errors will make it into the console, not preventing the analytics call from firing if it would otherwise be valid, but they will allow for reporting into Airbrake if you have Airbrake connected to Apollo, so you can proactively detect items that don't match those conditions. So I'll go ahead and cancel out of this, but that reviews how to use the replace function to customize items that might already be in the system, but you have minor differences in wording or structure that you might want to reflect.